automatically went on. This is exciting.
Oh, that's great.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful video.
Oh, thank you. That's my tarot deck that I had, little commercial thing. I thought that was really uptown.
Oh, that's awesome. It's very well produced. Very
Thank
well
you.
produced.
Thank you so much. Oh, I'm so glad you're here. I read your book. I've heard you on many podcasts and YouTube videos. And I decided to leave the comments open so I can write down questions for you if we have time for them. But I'd love for you to share your story. And then after that, if we could have time for question and answer. It really depends. It really depends on your timing, because I could stay all day and talk to you.
I'm all good.
Okay, awesome. Awesome. Okay. So everyone, this is my friend, my new friend, Stephen Weber in the very hot Florida. So he's inside doing this for us. All right. So I'd love to hear your story.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, it's very kind of you to invite me on. And it's been a long journey for me. I didn't I didn't go, all I did was survive this experience. And I wasn't a spiritualist before having this experience. And for your audience members who may not be familiar with it, is I was involved in this near fatal motorcycle accident. And from that experience, not just the accident, but while I was in a coma afterwards, I experienced so many beautiful things. I mean, I really did. It was an eye-opening experience for someone who wasn't a spiritual person.
Mhm.
I mean, I was a Christmas and Easter Catholic, and the church is the center of our town. But with the exception of that, I don't think I was very spiritual. I guess it all started years before, like the way my life changed. It started years before I actually had that accident that brought me to that other place. I was in I've been a biker most of my life, Harley riders. I lived right next door to like an open field, so everyone had dirt bikes and mini bikes, and I had a paper route, and so I bought a motorcycle when I was a very young kid. Driving dirt bikes, I just loved it. You give me two wheels, and my sense of responsibility goes out the window really quickly. Because I love it. I just really do. Even now, around where I live in Orlando, there's miles and miles of biking trails. I don't ride a motorcycle anymore, but I have all these electric bikes and electric scooters, and I certainly have a lot of fun on. I feel like I'm 12 years old, but no, it is. It's so much fun. It really is. And but I guess the way my life changed, I guess, was all the way back in 2005. It was 4th of July weekend, the very same weekend that we're recording this podcast on, back in 2005. And I was out riding all night long. I was out with friends, and it was late at night. It was like 1 a.m. We were zipping all up and down Fire Island. If you're familiar with Long Island, where I live, Fire Island is like this beautiful beach area that we just have a lot of fun. We zip up and down the roads with other bikers, and we just have a really good time. And so I was on my way back, and I was driving up what we call the Meadowbrook Parkway. And all of a sudden I lean over and I see this gentleman in a pickup truck driving right next to me. Something felt very odd about it. And it was late at night, and there was construction going on. So I wasn't really sure what was going on, but that tingling in the back of your spidey senses gets up. And I finally realized that this guy was driving the wrong way in the opposite lane. I was going northbound on the Meadowbrook Parkway, and he should have been going southbound, but he was going northbound too. And he was driving right next to me. I mean, there was nothing about the way he was driving. He just looked like a person on his way to work. But that's what seems so surreal about it. But then what had happened is the guardrail went away between us, and then he was driving right next to me. And I got very concerned, and so I immediately pulled over to the furthest lane from him. And right then he went into a bridge, and he went head on into a limousine, a family coming home from a wedding. And this gentleman killed a little girl and the limo driver. and severely injured all the members of the party. And I've seen many accidents being a Harley rider and riding all over the United States, especially during what I call the witching hours, like between 2 and 5 a.m., where people are tired and a lot of crazy stuff goes on. But it was a holiday weekend. There were people immediately on scene, and so I headed home, and that was it. Is that I saw in the paper the next day that that they were actually charging the gentleman with homicide, second degree homicide, because there was allegation that he had been drinking, and so, but to me, and they were calling for witnesses. To me, it seemed like the circumstances were very clear. I mean, they didn't need me to sit there and say he was driving the wrong way. And I don't mean to make light of it, but the facts seemed very apparent to me. But then about a year later, a friend called me up and said, "Steve, you got to look at the newspaper." And so I picked up our local newspaper. It was on the front page. There was a trial going on. And as I read the recounting of all the things that had happened up until that point, I really needed to come forward and at least let them know what I saw that night. And I testified at that trial for that young man, because he was a young man, and I bared honest witness to what I saw, and they convicted that man, and they sentenced him to, I believe it was 16 years to life for what he had done.
Mm.
Very mixed feelings about that, because that I understood the pain and the heartbreak of the family, but I also understood that this was a kid who made a terrible mistake. I was very torn between that.
Hmm.
And I saw the parents; they were heartbroken and they were very angry, and I understood their anger and their heartbreak and their sorrow, and it changed my life. It really did.
Yeah.
I was focused. Go ahead.
You know, one of the things I noticed in your book and your story about this is that you make mention that you wondered if you could do anything to help, to motion to him that he was going the wrong way or something. But I kind of put myself into your shoes. And if I was in that situation, I would be 100% focused on not getting killed. Right.
Yeah, I understand that. It tortured me. That
Yeah.
wasn't my feeling. I wasn't so much concerned about my safety in the sense because I felt so I've driven New York City. That's where I drove my motorcycle. There's cars all around you. I
Oh.
felt very comfortable in that situation. It wasn't so much that, although I did move over, it was that I wasted so much time trying to figure out, is what I'm seeing really so? Because there was construction going on and other things going on. Like, he looked like a construction vehicle at first.
Mm.
And I should have went with my Om Namo Guru Dev Namo, my inner teacher, my inner awareness first. And I didn't. And I learned a very painful but good lesson that day,
Mm.
that so much of that is inside you, your intuition, and yourself reading tarot cards, and in your spiritual
Mhm.
practice, I'm sure you've experienced that as well. That intuition, it's very
Very powerful.
very, very powerful. And I reasoned away my caution. And when I finally realized what was going on, it was too late. And I was heartbroken on it, because I really did. I felt like I could have done something if I
Yeah.
just wasn't, oh wow, is this really real? And it really taught me that you have to act very quickly in these types of situations. You really do.
Yeah. Yeah. I think everything was perfect. I mean, it's easy for me to say, but when you back up far enough from a situation, which you're going to take us, it'll all blend together. It's a great story. So I'll let you have it.
Well, I didn't know that these the events that were to transpire were actually connected. It wasn't until many years later that I began to really put the pieces together, because that event changed my life in such a profound way. I was what you would call, I guess, an outlaw biker. I mean, I didn't do illegal things besides drive really fast and act irresponsibly. but I was full with all the tattoos. I still have all my tattoos,
Eh,
and and I was a computer guy, and I was an independent computer guy, so I really didn't have a boss to answer to. I had clients to answer to, but I knew my computers fairly well, and I had very good business relationships, so that gave me a lot of freedom. But this, like, totally, I changed my life. I was in business with my brother. We owned a computer firm, and I left the business with basically the shirt on my back. And I took a few clients with me as my agreement with my brother, and I worked I worked part time, but I became a full time dad. I had two young children, and I saw the heartbreak in that family after they lost their daughter. And I wasn't going to let that happen to me. I was going to be a the best father that I can be. And I
mm,
really was. As I was elected to a school board. I ran a school district. I was involved in all of these local activities subsequent to this because I wanted to be involved in my community and my children's life. And that's the way it went for quite some time. I was struggling for money, but it was well worth it because I got to raise my children,
yes.
and it was the best experience I ever had. A lot of ways I thought, at least for a long time, that that was a job that I was uniquely cut out for. And
Mhm.
and so one afternoon, like I did very often, is out here on Long Island. There's a place called the Hamptons where all the movie stars hang out, and there's beautiful beaches. And I knew this dive of a barbecue place that I used to like to go out to. It was like a 2 hour drive out into the country, and so I would go out there. I'd have some barbecue, and then I'd drive on the way back. But I picked a really bad day. It was one of those beach days, and the traffic was backed up for miles. In fact, I think there was probably an accident because that it wasn't moving at all, and I was stuck in traffic with this big, heavy Harley Davidson. It was really hot, and it was very difficult. It was very difficult, and I noticed people were driving on the shoulder of the road to like make a right hand turn to get out of this mess. And so after a little while of sitting there, that's what I did. And what happened is when I got to the intersection, just as that time, somebody was making a left hand turn right into the intersection, a truck, and it blindsided me. It T-boned me right on the side of myself and my bike. And the lights went out. I mean, I was unconscious, and it was quite some time before I woke up. And I realized that because it was starting to get dark out, and when I had left on my bike, it was the afternoon, and I saw there were emergency workers all around me, and I realized my life is going to change. And I remember one of the emergency, I wanted to get up because as a young kid, whenever you'd fall off your motorcycle, you always got up right away, rightly or wrongly. If you got into an accident, you had knocked down, get up right away, or you will stay down. It's kind of like getting knocked off a horse. You get back on the horse right away. And when I did, I felt like my leg was disconnected. I felt the bone sticking into me, and the lights went out again. I must have passed out. And the next things I know is I was rising through the clouds. I was going higher and higher and higher. I wasn't sure what was going on. I probably thought I was dying. And but what started happening is I started to get lower in the clouds, and I started to approach the ground, and I saw this big circle on the ground with a big H in it. And I realized what was going on. I was in a helicopter. I was being airlifted to Stony Brook Hospital, one of the premier medical centers, trauma centers in the world. It's a university hospital who like pioneered sonograms and
Yeah.
other. It's just a marvelous facility.
Yeah,
And
but you saw the H, right? So you were out of your body this whole
no,
time.
no, no, I wasn't
No?
yeah, know what it was? The
Uh,
helicopter. If you ever saw MASH, they
yeah.
have the stretchers on the outside of the helicopters. This is
Oh,
what that was. Is I was strapped to the outside of the helicopters
I
so I
didn't
could
know
sit
that.
down. Yeah, I didn't know that because it's a hospital helicopter, but it's really a small thing. It's like the size of a
Wow.
small car. And
Wow.
and
Okay.
yeah. And but I was so familiar with Stony Brook Hospital because I'm a graduate of Stony Brook University. My mother's a graduate of Stony Brook University. My daughter's a graduate of Stony Brook University. And so I'm very familiar with the area there.
Mhm.
And so yeah, I and that was the last day I was spiritually on this earth for a very long time because
Mm.
I had grave injuries on my
Mhm.
spine. All my vertebrae, a lot of my vertebrae were broken. My hip was completely shattered. I had compound fractures in my legs. I had broken arm. I could go down the list. It looks more like an autopsy report than an accident report, from what some doctors had once told me. And but the most serious injury, I had internal injuries, and they couldn't find the bleeding, and so I had to take several surgeries and to take care of that. But they did marvelous work, just miracle workers. But then I was in a coma. I was in a coma for about a month, and it was a very touch and go coma. It really was. There were several crises that they had to address, and to the rest of the world. I was in
Mhm.
my hospital bed, but in myself, in my body, in my spirit, I was in a completely another place, a place I
Mhm.
called between here and there.
There, I love this.
Yeah, it really is. At first, for the longest time afterwards, when I would recount it before I fully understood it the way I would now, I referred to it as the universe according to Steve. You know, because I joked about it because I didn't believe it. I didn't believe this experience for like the first year. I thought it was like the sedatives they gave me and stuff.
Yeah.
It was just so outside of what I was prepared for, and I felt kind of shamed by it because that being a spiritualist now, if the Steve
Mm.
who met Steve today 10 years ago, he'd beat the crap out of him. I mean, no, I was kind of ashamed by it. So when I recounted the story to some friends and stuff, I would laugh and joke about it. But
Yeah.
but really, when I say it was a place between here and there, it was kind of like what Catholics call purgatory, but it wasn't a place of punishment. What I believe now I was going through is that my body was going through the death process. My body thought it was going to die, and by every
Mm.
reason
Yeah.
I was going to die. But it's just by this miracle of medicine. Not only did I survive, but I survived with all my cognitive abilities. Although I
Mm.
whacked my head pretty good, I was nutty to begin with, so blame the accident. But no, no. So my hospital bed for a long time.
Wow,
And
this is what makes it unique. This in between, some people go, there's many mansions in heaven, and some people go, they go to their mansion that they feel most comfortable with. This is my understanding. So when you went to the in between place, I mean, the Steve today wouldn't go there, but the Steve then would go there because that's where you're most comfortable to understand.
Debbie, I think that's very, very close to the
Mhm.
reality. I really do. What I really believe is that the lessons that I learned there, excuse me, the knowledge that I learned, I believe that everybody learns that. It's part of
Mhm.
sharing what you've experienced and receiving what you need to learn for this next step in your spiritual growth. I believe that very true. But what I was experienced was according to what would reach me, what would
Yes.
teach me those lessons. And you would receive different lessons, as would
Yeah.
somebody in Colombia or Tanzania or some other place.
Yeah.
It was in a way that I could understand it. It was in such a way that I could understand it. At first, I didn't know anything was going on. In fact, for a long time, I thought I was in my regular life. I really was.
That's the blessing. That's the promise.
Well,
It's real.
I guess the first things I learned is that I guess I was being taught. I was being taught essentially, I believe, is how to see and sense spirit in everybody and everything, not the least of which is my own spirit, and how to recognize that spirit. And And it wasn't like I was sat down and they opened up a book and said, okay, Steve, this is spirituality 101, start right here. No,
Yeah.
and it was no they. It was just myself in this situation. And and what happened first is the way that they taught me how to sense spirit is in thing is that I was in a work like setting, and I was working with a client who I hadn't seen in decades, and this guy was a character. He was from Haiti, and he spoke French, and he spoke like a Creole language. He was very expressive because he didn't know all the words, and so he would make up for it with like his expressions. And he was quite a character. But I only know him for about a year. You know, in the whole grand scheme of my life, you know, he was just an acquaintance. But he played such a prominent role because that first things I realized when I saw him is that he didn't age at all. You know, I was like, "Hey, you look great, man. What are you doing? Can I have some?" He didn't age at all, and so we just had a very regular conversation, and that was what was it. And then the next time as I saw him, he had aged like 50 years.
Hmm.
At first, I didn't recognize him, but then he like had a certain manner about him, like I saw the expressions that he would do and stuff, and I would say, aren't you so and so? And would say, oh yeah, you got me this time. Yes, yes, yes. And, and that seemed very odd. And the whole time is that I don't know why it didn't occur to me like this is out of like complete normalcy. You know, I just went with it. And
Right.
and then the next time he appeared to me, I believe as a child. And then I would see a mannerism and I would guess who he was. And then I kind of like got what was going on is that this gentleman would appear to me in all different shapes, all different nationalities, all different ethnicities, all different ages. And I would have to guess that it was him. And but what started happening after a while is that I didn't have to look for the mannerisms. All of a sudden, like I started to feel like I started to sense like although I kept on guessing who he was different on the outside every time, but his inside, his spirit was always the same spirit. And I began to sense that spirit. I didn't have to rely on his physical appearance or his mannerisms or anything about him. I began more and more be able to not only sense his spirit, but I could sense him even before he arrived.
Mm.
And 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 once I learned how to sense that spirit in him, that was when the door opened up. It was like Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz. When she opens up that door, it goes from black and white to color because all of a sudden everything changed. Like I started to begin to realize that everything we're experienced to is part of spirit. Everything, the planet, us, the plants, the trees, everything, we all share this spirit because now I could sense the spirit in everything. And whether you believe in the Big Bang or let there be light, it all explains the same thing that we're all connected. We're all spirit. We're all stardust. We share a consciousness. And what I believe is that, and this is Steve's belief, that I believe that what I was being shown then is that the creator and the creation are one. We are the creator, all of our collective consciousness together. We make up the spirit and the body and the whole existence of the creator. That means the planets, we are all connected. We are all having this earthly experience to learn and grow. And as we learn and grow, the awareness of everything learns and grows. And this is Stephen's opinion. And 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 once I began to understand that, everything changed because that as I went through these different experiences there, it wasn't that someone was guiding me. It was that I stayed in an experience until I believe I learned the lessons that I
Mm.
needed to learn. And when I stopped learning, I would go on to the next experience. And so once I learned how to see spirit and I sensed our role of the reasons for our existence and how we're all connected and how we all learn and grow and how we share. Once I learned those experiences, I went to the very next experience. And what that next experience was is a life review. I didn't understand it at the time, but what happened is that I was brought through my life, not not as I was a voyeur, like somebody watching my life, or not as I was a participant in my life. It was like I was part of everything that surrounded my life. Like I felt like I was everywhere. I did. And then I would go through, I'd review all of these things in my life and I would review these experiences. And then after I went through my life review, is that my awareness was raised. It was because I looked at my life in a different way. Like some of the things I experienced when I was 6 years old, but I wasn't 6 years old now, reviewing those things as if they're happening all over again. They took on new meanings to me. So as I started to go through these experiences and I started to learn, is that I started to feel this wonderful bliss. Because as I started going through these experiences, I started to relieve myself of all of these blockages, both the hates and the animosity that I had towards others and other things in my life, and the shame and regret that I had for myself. I'm sure a lot of people are like this as well. But there were things I did when I was a little kid that I like. Oh, I'm such an idiot. But it's different because now I went through all those things again, and I learned and I grew from those experiences. And once I relieved myself of the blockages, is that I felt such a burden released. But the most important thing as I learned in there is that the worst experiences of my life, the ones that were the most heartbreaking experiences, were the ones that brought me the most bliss. Because once I understood them and really learned the lesson, is that I was such a relieved. It really was. It was so much. Once you have those experiences and you're relieved of those burdens, it is such a beauty. And the way I would describe it is a lot of times when people explain their spiritual transformative experiences, or better known as near-death experiences, as they explain those things, they sometimes they talk about beautiful flowers and beautiful sunsets and all these wonderful things that were so beautiful. Um, uh, and that was what they saw. I didn't see those things, but I felt that beauty because the beauty was truly for me in being relieved, being able to make a sense of everything that I had in my life. And that was a bliss on and on of itself. And I was so excited. I did my life review closer to 1,000,000 times than it was to one. I don't know how many times I went through my life review, but I went through so many very happy things, but very sad things. And it's not that I had a sad life, but everybody has. I mean, everybody. I mean, most people do. They have wonderful things, but sometimes they have sad things. But often people let the sad things ruin their life, or run their life, or take up so much of their mental and spiritual energy. I was no exception. And so it was definitely a very freeing and beautiful experience to have that life review.
I've never heard anyone say that that their life review was. I mean, they felt like they were caressed by love during it. Now I got to tell you, uh, I think if I had very few breaths left, I would be nervous about my life review. And you think, oh, I do things today, and I think, oh, I could have done that so much better after I've gotten away from it, or then I feel bad, really, really bad. But you said you did the same thing, but during this experience, that guilt and remorse lifted,
So
and you
true.
don't feel the same anymore.
No, I don't. In fact,
Cool.
it's changed my life going on in a way, because if I can't look back at my life 6 months ago and think what a jerk I was, it
Mhm.
means that I'm not growing. No, it really does. It's like it's almost
Mm,
like I live a guilt-free existence now, because that as I learn and grow, every time I learn something new, in the same way I felt blissful when I was doing my life review, I receive a little taste of that bliss every time I find out a fault of mine or something I could have done differently, or I could have, done in a different way. I feel excited by it now. I don't feel grieved by it. And it really, it's such a liberating experience, because really, Deb, if you could look back at some of the things you did, say, well, I really shouldn't have done that. That means that's great. That's great, because now hopefully you won't make that mistake again,
right.
or maybe just a half a mistake in the future. There's
I know.
some
I
lessons
could
I
have
have
done
to
it
learn
better.
more than once. Yeah,
That riddles me though. I mean,
yeah.
as I fall asleep at night and wake up in the morning, it's like, um, oh, it's miserable. But I have your story to pick me up and learn from.
Well, I understand that feeling, because
Yeah.
I felt for the longest time, and even Kathy's a dear friend of mine who I'll share some stories with, but Kathy struggles with that as well. She always says that I let things roll off my back too easy. It's
Oh,
like
too easy.
too easy.
I don't like
That I
that.
should torture myself a little bit more, especially when I'm mean. I don't look sorry enough.
Right. I want you a little more miserable like me. But
But
I'm glad you learned that. That was one of the questions a viewer was asking. And I went to pin, I'm new at this. I went to pin her question so I could ask you. And I accidentally banned her. I have no idea how to get her back. Now I'm going to,
Feel pretty
that's a guilt and remorse right during your story. Oh, I'll find her and I will find her in
Take
the ethers. But that was her question about, how the wisdom that you brought
yeah.
back. You brought back a lot, and I don't want to interrupt anymore, but thank you. So there you are.
You're not interrupting at all.
This is
You're so
so fun.
wonderful. I'm really enjoying the experience speaking with you
I'm
and having a
glad.
good time with your audience.
I'm
And
glad.
so after a while, as I stopped learning in this
Mhm.
in the life review, and the next thing is I experienced, and once again, as I didn't know this at the time, is that I went through a test where I was being tested on what I had learned, and I believe, and once again, the universe, according to Steve, I believe that if I would have failed that test, no, I did fail that test. If I would have passed that test, I would have stayed in spirit, and that I would have gone on to the next spiritual evolution
Hmm.
without being part of a physical body. But I failed that test miserably. And what it was is I was put in charge of these young adults. I called them kids, but they were young adults, and they were working in a restaurant. And I interacted with the restaurant owner, and I had to guide these young kids in their tasks. And no matter what I did, the kids wouldn't listen. Well, what I mean is that they would tell me yes, 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 and then when I would walk away, they would scatter and do whatever kids do, and then I'd see them later, and they would be like nothing was wrong, and I'd be so upset, and I just couldn't understand it, why I couldn't communicate with these kids. And
Mhm.
they just wouldn't listen to me. And I tried everything, like red team, blue team. Okay, I'll give awards. You could go home early. I tried all these things, but nothing was working. And so I went to the owner, and once again, I didn't speak to the owner. Like, it wasn't like speaking, but it wasn't like Star Trek, telepathy. But it was just like awareness. Like, I stood before the owner, and I was really at my wit's end, and the owner like touched my shoulder, and all of a sudden everything changed once again. Is that I realized, and I believe, that I was looking into the eyes of my higher self. Is that I think I think that part of your spirit, part of your existence is always in spirit, and just a part of you comes down to earth to have a human experience. And I think one of the reasons why we experience that, because when you're in spirit, you can't make the mistakes that you could make mistakes as in life. And that's how you learn, is by making those mistakes. And once my higher self, and when I stood before my higher self, is that I couldn't I could sense the wisdom. I could sense all the knowledge. I don't know how that knowledge came to be, but it was like a grace. I don't know how to explain it in a way, but once I stood before my higher self, it's like things became more clear to me. It's not like he, they, them pronouns said anything to me. It was just standing in that grace. And I realized I totally mistook the situation. Is that I wasn't here to teach these kids how to do tasks in a restaurant. I was here to mentor them into their first human incarnation, that these were spirits who were yet to have a human incarnation. And I didn't realize that because I spent so much time learning about how to sense spirit, how your experiences makes you learn and grow. And I spent all of this time doing that. But my first opportunity to use that is I didn't use that. All I saw was dopey kids. I didn't see them as spirits. And and once I made that transition, things changed, and I was be able to be more of a mentor. And 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 what I began to realize from that experience is that I believe, once again, universe according to Steve, is that I believe that our spirits were created with the creation, with the Big Bang, let there be light, whatever you believe in. But they weren't created in our current form, is that we learn and grow through many different incarnations, whether person or animal or planet, or just we're all part of many incarnations, and it's through each incarnation our spirit grows and our understanding grows. And so I believe that perhaps humans are one of the final stages, at least from my experience so far, of that. I don't know that that's true, but because humans can experience things, they could take care of their children, they could feel hardships and sorrows, they could have responsibility. There's certain things that you know a critter may not, a chipmunk or something, or a spider or something.
Right.
All these things are phases that your spirit goes through to learn the lessons. And so that was my experience there. But there was somebody else there. Is that there was this lady who was constantly praying, and I didn't recognize this lady, but there was something about her that didn't fit with the whole situation, because that everyone had a purpose there. They really did. Everybody except for her. All she did was pray. But I couldn't really listen to the words, but the words didn't matter. It was like this love that I felt just being in her presence, the same way that I felt the grace from my higher self. I felt this love, but it was like an intelligence. It was more than just a warm and fuzzy love. It was like this intelligence, this wisdom, this intense love. And it was like the prayer was almost like a road on which this love traveled on. And as I was struggling through these very difficult situations with the children, is that gave me energy. I mean, it really did. It gave me, when I would feel that love and energy, it gave me the energy to put one foot in front of the other and just continue with it. It was a very odd experience. And um and then uh and then everything stopped. And then I was presented with what I understood, at least at that time, was my final experience. Is that I come from a small town in New York called Kings Park, and it's a working class neighborhood surrounded by very affluent neighborhoods. We had small cottage industries in our town. We were very close. And at the end of every day, we go to the seashore. There's a bluff that overlooks the Long Island Sound, and we all hang out and drink from red Solo cups, sometimes coffee, sometimes not. and we do all the gossip in town, like who's doing who, and like all that stuff. And so I found myself in this place sitting with two friends of mine, Joey and Johnny from town, and they were both in their mid to late 70s. They were about 20 years older than me, maybe a little bit more. And John, he like did the readings in church, and like he was like the voice of God. You know, you would hear him speak, and it'd be like, and Jesus said, and the ground would shake. You know, and he was such a good guy. I lived in a neighborhood. You were either we would call them the three eyes. You were either Italian, Irish, or Israel. You know,
Oh,
Italian,
funny.
Irish, or Jewish. You know, that everybody, the people that nobody wanted, but we found a way to make a life for ourselves and marry each other. Excuse me. And so, John, he was a great guy. He suffered with diabetes. You know, he was, he struggled with that most of his life. And Joey, he was another Irish guy. He spoke with a brogue, and he told the funniest stories. He was just a great guy to be around. I mean, he didn't drink anymore because he had to stop years ago, but he still had that wit, that Irish wit that's just so intoxicating at times. I really enjoyed both of their company. And we would sit and we would watch the sun set every day. And I use the term day because we're night and days like there are here, is that if it was part of the experience, but no, time didn't exist there like it exists here. It's like time here is like, what is time? Well, you have appointments in the future. You can cook food. It was cold a minute ago. Now it's hot. There was a passage of time. There wasn't a passage of time. The only way you could really measure the passage of time was by your spiritual growth, because you could see the path you walked to have grown spiritually. And sometimes that was a very long time, because where we say time is like, I spent so many more experiences there than I've had here. It just wasn't like that. And so when I say the sun rose and set, and I use the term days, is because that was part of this experience. And so when I would sit there and I'd watch the sunset every day, which Joey and John, I thought nothing of it. But then, and we didn't talk. We just sat there and we watched the sunset, and sometimes people don't talk because it's a very spiritual time when you watch the sunset. And then one day, as I realized that both Joey and Johnny had passed earlier that year. Johnny died of his diabetes. He had an infection in his leg, and it took his life. And then Joey, he had broken his back down at the bluff at where we'd watch the sunsets as a little kid, and he had like spinal implants, and so he kind of like walked like Frankenstein. He really couldn't twist, and he got hit by a car, probably because he couldn't turn and see the car coming. I mean, I don't know that, but that's the talk. And for the first time, it's like I was frightened there, because like all of a sudden, although all these things happened to me, I don't know why it didn't cross my mind that this couldn't be happening, all this stuff. And I guess it's because I was just so blissful. Like I just didn't want to ask. I didn't want to know anything. I just wanted to enjoy it. I didn't want to ask it. But I just don't know why it didn't occur to me. But now this occurred to me that, wow, how could this be happening? Really, how could this be happening? I know these two fellas have passed. And so then when I would see the sunsets with them, I would want to ask them, what are they doing here? Because it went over in my mind, like I should ask them, what are they doing here? But for some reason, I didn't want to ask them. Once again, I don't know why, but I just didn't want to ask them. But as time went on, as I felt an urgency building and building and building, and finally the one day that I felt like if I didn't ask them today, I would never get this chance again. And so finally, I asked them, in my own mind, I didn't verbalize it, what are you doing here? And they said to me, because they were here because they wanted to make sure that I was all right. And that didn't make sense to me, because I didn't really think of I didn't realize I was in an accident. This was just my regular life. And like There was nothing wrong with me. What do you mean for me to be all right? And then we watched the sunset. And then as the sun set, instead of getting darker, it just gotten brighter and brighter and brighter. And I had to shield my eyes because it was so bright. And then when I sensed the brightness had gone away, the brightness had gone away, is I opened my eyes. I was in my hospital room.
Mm.
My, and my mother was right next to me, and she was holding my hand. And she told me that I'd been in a terrible accident, but I was going to be okay. And that's what happened as far as that place went.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in, you know, I was intubated. I couldn't breathe. I mean, I could breathe fine because I was intubated, but I was in this hospital room and I really didn't know what was going on. And but still, part of me was in that other place. It wasn't like a switch. It was like I felt like I was still there in many ways. Like I found it very tough verbalizing things. Like I would use strange words. Like I remember finally when I got the thing out of my mouth, I wasn't intubated anymore. I saw this nurse. She was obviously a young lady. She was, gosh, she cared so much. She really did. She took care of me when nobody was looking. Like, no, I wanted to know more about her. I wanted to know how old she was, but I couldn't like figure out what to say to her. So I asked her, for how many years has she been on this planet?
Oh, interesting.
But it was definitely and I was in such a bad way. I really was. I couldn't walk. I had to go to rehab and such. And
We
good.
we had a couple of questions. Number one, I think it was Cynthia wanted to know, when you were doing your life review, it's common thinking that when you witness what you might have done, good or bad, you feel what the other person felt from your actions. Is that how you learned?
Very good, very good. Something like that.
Okay.
Because that I could sense. Now I could see spirit in things. That's a great question. now that I could see spirit in things, is that every situation that I experienced is that I not only saw it from, because I was everything around this, is that I knew what everyone was thinking, is I knew what everyone's perceptions were. And it was then I began to realize that affected the way that I viewed it, not only from my wisdom growing up and being much older now from when those things experienced, like if your dog bites you when you're 6 years old, you could be afraid of dogs all your life and never know why. Or you could ask yourself, do you know the difference between a bad dog and a good dog and how to judge things? But I had that wisdom, but now I knew what everyone else was thinking. And so everyone else had their own spiritual reason for being there. They had the physical reason, which was going on, but we also had a spiritual reason, the lessons that each person had to learn. So everything was important for everyone. No one was a voyeur, even though they were. Everyone was an active participant. And that taught me a lot about life, because I see that in every experience now. There's a physical reason for it, but there's a spiritual growth reason. And the more I have found that I look for that spiritual growth reason, I find more guidance here as well.
Right. Exactly. Oh, wow. 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 I do numerology, and I'm in a 6 personal year. And that's one of the lessons that I'm learning this year, is that normally I would go from 0 to 60 if someone bats an eye that I don't like, it's like, and this year, in the beginning of the year, it was like I'd go 0 to 100 and really be mad, and I couldn't shake it, kind of thing. But that's the lesson of a 6, it's that control thing. And I realized the blessing of the 6 personal year is that I was able to pause. And I think that's what you're explaining. It's like you give a space between that, how dare you, and the remembering that that person didn't get out of bed to make me mad. That's not their intention. And it gives me a different perspective, and my life is so much easier for that. But you learned that years ago. That is
Well,
fantastic.
well,
Just
it wasn't from trying. Once again, it's all I did was survive this experience. I didn't
mm,
expect it. I didn't know what to make of it, and I'm glad I've had it. It's the best thing that's ever happened
sure,
to me. It's true, but
sure.
but for anybody, the powers that be could have picked a lot better person for this experience than I believe.
No, you're wonderful. You're perfect. I just have one more question before we continue. Um, is Joey and Johnny ever visit you since?
No.
Okay.
But let me explain. This is really important. I shouldn't say no. No, no, no. That was not right. Okay. So so when I was recovering, is that it was so difficult I couldn't walk at all. And I was in a lot of pain. I really was. And I was just trying to manage. But I had this drive in me, this intense drive in me to get better, as I knew that if I stuck with it, I would get almost 100% better than I was before, because I was in a lot worse shape. Now I'm in great physical shape, just because of my life changes, my lifestyle changes. But
Mhm.
but I knew there was a certainty of outcome. And it was then I realized what Joey and Johnny meant when they said that they were there to make sure I was okay. They didn't mean there. They meant here, that they were going to be my spirit guides, that they were going to help me through this critical phase in my recovery. Because you see, Johnny, he had diabetes. He died of an infection in his leg. My leg was all mangled. I had all these implants in my leg and everything else. And Joey, he had a back. He had all these metal implants in his back. And that's what
Yeah.
I had. How did this happen? I mean,
Yeah.
really, how did
Yeah.
this happen that just I never thought that there was a plan for things. I always thought the stage was set and whatever happens, happens. But gosh, I mean, and it wasn't like they sat there and they said, like, one more push up, Steve. It wasn't like that, but I felt their energy. I felt their wisdom in the same way I felt the wisdom of my higher self when I stood before my higher self and I understood the wisdom. That's what I was receiving from them as my spirit guide, not
Mm.
spirit shields. They weren't there to prevent me from experiencing pain and trauma and stuff, but they were helping me to put that one foot forward. But really, they gave me that surety of outcome that if I did these things, I would get better.
Oh, good. Wonderful, wonderful. So now you have a long road to, now that you're back and facing the real world, not the real world, the malleable world.
One of
Um,
them.
yeah, one of the one of the many. So it was a long road to recovery. Tell us about that.
Well, one of the things that I realized is that lady who was there, I could see who was praying in that other place, is
Yeah.
that is that now I could see spirit. I know who that lady was. I know she was a dear friend of mine. This lady I would go hiking with the dogs with. I formed a civic group with her. I explained how after I experienced that first situation, I became very local, active in local
Oh
politics. I was
yeah.
on the school board. She was one of the teacher parents and all this stuff. Very nice, very spiritual lady. And I used to think she was batshit crazy, although I liked her because she was very nice and she would walk long distances with the dogs with me. She wouldn't run out of gas or anything.
Yeah.
So it was really good company. And I realized that was her praying for me. I
Oh.
really did. And so as soon as I got my phone back, I texted her and I said, thank you for visiting me when I was out, if you know what I mean. And she texted me
Oh.
back right away and she says, I said, yes, yes, you came to visit me and you were praying for me. And I felt your love the whole time. I said, you were here with me in the room. And she said, Steve, I never visited you. And I said, no, you were there. And I was so certain of it. And Kathy's like a athlete. You know, she had a twin brother who was like 6 foot something, and she was a little tiny girl, and she had to keep up with this guy. And so she's a tough customer. She punches like a man. I mean, she
Good for
really
her.
she does. And so she helped me with my recovery. She was like halfway between Sergeant Slaughter and Mother Teresa. You know, she found this like balance and stuff. And and it was a big part of my recovery. It really was. And and every once in a while I would talk about the experience, but I would laugh about the experience. But anytime I talked about this, excuse me, anytime I talked about the experience, she didn't laugh. You know,
Mhm.
she would tell me, Stephen,
That's real.
it's not a joke.
Yeah.
And I didn't believe it, and she spent a lot of time trying to convince me. And
Mhm.
so, but I was always very nice. You know, I was starting. We were always friends, but and just friends. I mean, just friends. I mean, we were really good friends. But now we're spending so much time together. I don't know. I was kind of
Mhm.
thinking of her in a different way now. I didn't want to.
Mm.
I didn't want to upset her, so I kind of would nod and stuff. And then one day, my cousin went to a medium, and she uh, let me let me and so I'm getting a little ahead of myself. But she would always talk to me about it, and it was very you know, it was a very challenging time. But without her help, I don't know if I would have done as well as I did. And everything was getting better there for a while. And then the worst thing that could happen to somebody happened is that one evening I went down into my basement and I saw my 20-year-old son dead from a drug overdose. And um, and he was a beautiful child. It was such short. It wasn't like you know, people that if they have an addiction in their family that something was going on for years. No, it wasn't like that. He was a championship wrestler. He was on a scholarship to one of the premier engineering schools. He was a musician. He played the piano like Mozart. He played the saxophone like Dizzy Gillespie played the horn. He played the guitar like Jimi Hendrix. And he was a championship wrestler, New York State champion. He had so many things going for him. But when he went to college, he just fell into a bad group of people. And this is what happened. And I was devastated, you know, like being such an alt personality, like a biker, wasn't funny now. It wasn't. And it was like I thought, like, what could I have done? Like where did I go wrong? And because I gave up so much. It's not like I gave up so much. Is that I changed my whole life to be a full time dad. You know, after that first experience, and I didn't want any of this stuff. Is that it was just it was so heartbreaking. And just going through the funeral, it was, you know, my whole town came out. There wasn't a seat in the church. People were standing outside. You know, I had just gotten off the school board at that time, so that they closed the school for the day. You know, it was a really big thing. And I was very grateful for everyone's kindness. And but it was very difficult. And so mine and Kathy's walks got a lot quieter. It's like I didn't talk as much as we once did, and she didn't push me too much. You know, I really didn't talk about it, and I was just getting off my own experience, and then to have I try to work my way through this. It was so challenging. And then my cousin went to a meeting, and she went there to connect with her mother, or you know, someone in her family who had recently passed. And the medium said, there's a Nicholas, my son's name is Nicholas, is trying to get through. Do you want to let him through? And she, of course, said yes. And the medium started to say things. And the first thing the medium said is that the medium saw numbers.
Oh, I
She
love numbers.
saw numbers, and she saw 23 two, three, 23 and a 56. And she asked, "Does those numbers mean anything to you?" And just so happens is my cousin's son and my son, they were on the football team together. My son's number was 23 from Michael Jordan, and her son's number was 56 from Lawrence Taylor. You know, both of these are famous athletes.
Yeah. Oh my God.
and
So cool.
and it was just so odd that she said those things. And then she asked me, she says that Nick has a synchronicity with Saint Teresa. Saint Teresa, it's a Catholic saint. And she asked, "Have you been seeing flowers? Have you been seeing roses?" And it was just such the damnedest thing because for weeks ahead of time, Kathy and I kept on finding roses in the trails we were hiking on. And Kathy was saying this all along. She's saying someone's sending a message. And I'm saying, "You're out of your mind." I say, "No one's sending us messages, just flowers. Someone's probably taking wedding photos here." She said, "No, it's in the middle of the woods." I just poo-pooed it. I just didn't think anything of it. And my cousin Lisa said, "Yes, yes. He's been sending, it's Nick who's sending the flowers to let you know that he's hearing your prayers." And and Kathy thought this was a slam dunk, that okay, finally she's going to make Stephen understand things, and I didn't. I told you they could look stuff up on Facebook and stuff. It was a big event in our town, although the psychic didn't know she was associated with me in any way. But I didn't know. I just Facebook, the internet. I just didn't buy it all, and so that was it. And then one day, Kathy and I were out, and Kathy bought a little statue of Saint Teresa with herself. And then we approached the stream that we always walk by, and she put the statue of Saint Teresa underneath a tree, right at Central Casting, a beautiful tree with a stream going by, and she brought a magic marker with her and a few rocks, and she wrote some prayers on the rocks, like if you've heard our message, peace, love, and light, things about those things. And so she left a collection of rocks there along with the pen, the magic marker. And so we said a little prayer. I let Kathy do most of the praying for us at that time, and and then we went back to the tree like a week later, and there was literally 100 rocks there, all with prayers and saying something like, "I need a new job," or pray for my aunt Sue, or something like that. And it was then I began to realize, it was really like that we're all connected. That it reminded me of like that Sting song, "Message in a Bottle," where he talks about he put a message in a bottle, hoping someone will find it and answer his message and bring him peace. But instead, 100,000 bottles wash up on the shore, all with their own messages. And that's the way I felt, but not as a way of like defeating, like a way like, no, we're all connected. We're all in this together. It's all gets back to the beginning of my experience there, as when I began to realize that we're all part of the same consciousness. We're all part of the same spirit. We're all there for each other. And it was this that it started to bring some healing back to me, that I started for the first time to come to terms with not only the passing of my beautiful child, but also from my experience in the place between here and there. I started to see all these different signs and synchronicities happening in my life. And then it was like a year after the passing of my son. A friend of ours gave us a little mass card and with Saint Teresa on it. And so we were going back. We called it the Saint Teresa Woodland Shrine, and so we're going back there that day. And periodically we would visit it. Every once in a while, the magic marker would disappear, or we'd rearrange and tidy things up. And then what happened is that on the mass card we go to place the mass card down, and we see Saint Teresa was canonized on January 2nd, and that was the same day my son was born, January 2nd.
Gosh.
And then it told us the day she passed. It was the very same day that my son passed.
Mm.
Like, how does this happen? Like I ran that over in my mind. Like even one of those things is like I could send away in my own mind. But both of those things, what are the odds that such a thing could happen like that?
I love that.
And then so Kathy was like, I told you.
I would be too. I'd be doing that too.
And so finally, I kind of like capitulated a little bit. I was very emotional at the time, but I said, you might have something here. And then that night is I had the dream that many people experience when they lose a loved one, is that I dreamed that my son was with me, and nothing had happened. None of this had happened, and he was happy. And
yeah.
No, I'm okay. And he was happy. And then when I woke up from the dream, is I realized it was a dream. It wasn't real. But I didn't feel sad anymore. I
Oh,
really didn't. It was like he was telling me that it was okay, that he was okay, and he was happy. And it was really that I began to realize that if he was in that place that I was, that was such a beautiful place. And it really brought me such a peace. It really did. It really began to, I was starting to really put all the pieces together. And since that time, I say a lot of things are like a spiritual garden. You got to weed that garden. If you don't, just because things are good today, it doesn't mean tomorrow they're going to be good if you let the weeds grow. You got to weed your spiritual garden. And that's what I try to do every day is that most of the times I'm pretty, life is good. I really do. I live in paradise. I mean, really, I live in paradise here in Florida. I'm never coming from New York. That's like the other side of the rainbow.
Yeah.
I love New York. I love New Yorkers, but I'm never going there again. but so I'm a lot to be happy about. But then they caught the fella who sold my son the drugs. And because we had cameras on the outside of our house, our neighbors had cameras. My son didn't have any other drugs in his body at the time. He didn't have a history of drug abuse or anything, at least a very short history anyway. And they put the fellow on trial for second-degree murder, the very same charge that they charged the fellow in the beginning of it, who was involved in that accident that I shared in the beginning of our discussion. And so I went to the trial, and he actually was pleading it out. And but I went to the courts, and I was ready because I wanted to hate him. I really did. I wanted to hate this fella because he had done some terrible things. Not only to my son, but to other people. Other people got very sick. Another person almost died, and I wanted to hate this fella. And when I got to the courtroom, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I saw him, and he's just a kid. He's just a kid like that same kid who just made a bunch of dopey mistakes. For the grace of God, that wasn't me. I was no angel. I'm no angel now. And that I felt love for him, and I felt sorry for him. Not sorry like, oh, you poor thing, but I felt sorry in the sense that it had come to this in his life.
Yeah.
And I think that I wonder why I felt this way. And I think, and I don't know for sure, is that I think the experience with the parents of that other accident and their heartbreak and just experiencing all that. I believe all that was part of my life review. I really do. And it prepared me, and I learned those lessons that just, even if I wanted to hate this guy, I just couldn't do it because I've grown past that. And I understand society has its needs for doing things. And I don't know if he had to be separated from society for it, but he got 16 years to life too. And that was the very same charge that the fellow in the beginning
Yeah.
received. And I tell you, I feel awful about it. I really do. And I hope, if there's one thing that I wish, if somebody wants to bring me peace in my life, a parent's life who lost a kid, that I hope that someday in the not too distant future, that fella can get out and
Yeah.
have a real life for himself. And I would like nothing more for him to have a child. Him, I would, and he experienced so many of those things, the wrestling matches and weddings and
Boy, that's like having a life review. If he has children, a life review in real life.
no,
That'd be
because
hard. That'd be
wouldn't that be wonderful if he could have a life, if he could
yeah,
understand?
it would be.
He can't undo what he's done.
Yeah, it's
He
true.
can't. And so those are the things, and that's what I think that brings this whole thing full circle. It's like, how did all this happen? I mean, really, how did this happen? Are these all unrelated things? Is this the stage is set and these just things happen, or is there a master plan to things? Because when I was in that other place, I never felt a consciousness beyond myself that was like a hand that was guiding things. I felt like things just work this way, the way that our existence works. And so I just was, it just, it's something I go over in my mind over and over again. Is there a plan that we live through, or do we set our own destiny in life? How did I have this crazy experience with this guy driving the wrong way? How did I have this crazy spiritually transformative experience, this near-death experience? And then to follow up with this thing that's so closely parallels the first, and if I would have not have had my experience, I never would have made it through losing my son. Like all of those things, like how did all of this happen? Like those are some of the things I struggle with.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Well, this information is inspiring me, and through your words, I can imagine my own steps and have different perspectives. And that's your story. Your book is wonderful. And
Good.
yeah, that it's in Spanish too. Go ahead and
Yeah, it's in Spanish. But can I tell you other couple of stories? Do we have
love
a
it.
few minutes? Well, one of the things is that now I've been open to the signs and synchronicities of life, because I really used to believe at one point of my life there's such things as coincidences. Now I don't think I believe that anymore, and because a lot of things that had experience that was going on between that time that I accepted my experience as being real. There were so many signs. It's like, hey, Steve, I sent this medium. I sent this. I sent, it's like
Right.
I was ignoring everything. And now I'm so in tune to signs, and I see them all over the place in my life and in the lives of people around me. And and uh, and some of them are just so surreal. And I remember when Kathy and I were writing our book. The name of the book is called The Place Between Here and There. It's available on Amazon. And we were writing the book in the middle of this health crisis, which we've just gotten past, I believe. At least the experts tell me.
Yeah.
And this crisis. And so we're walking along the beach, and Kathy's a big saint person. She really is. She knows all the saints, and her favorite saint is Saint Germain, the Violet Flame, and she could tell you all about it. I'll save that for her someday. But Saint Germain is very important to her, And so as we're walking along the beach, she sends out this healing energy to the world. And so first off, if it wasn't for Kathy, this health crisis would have been a lot worse because she's sending out all her loving energy. And but after us walking along the beach, and she said she wanted a sign from Saint Germain to let her know that Saint Germain is hearing her prayers and is going to make them a reality for society. And so what she wanted to find was a piece of violet beach glass, because the violet flame, Saint Germain violet beach glass. Well, if you know anything about Long Island beach glass or walking along the beach, you will find hen's teeth before you find violet beach glass. There just is no violet beach glass. I mean, very, very rare. I mean, like 20 years we've been looking for beach glass. We found like one piece one time in like Rockville Center or someplace crazy, someplace, I don't mean Rockville Center, but just someplace, on the North Shore. But so we're on our way back, and she couldn't she didn't find violet beach glass, and she was really upset about it. I mean, she was very, very upset about it, and she had the pouty face on. So I'm just trying to think of something I could say to like make her feel better about it. And just then, on cue, this little Dalmatian puppy comes running between the sand dunes and starts jumping all over us and licking at us and mouthing us the way puppies can do. And we were just so excited because we love dogs. But the dog's parent comes running from behind the sand dunes. Oh, I'm sorry. Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, we love dogs. No, we love dogs. And we're petting him. We chat with her a while, and we go, so what's the dog's name? Violet. And so I'm like stunned by it, but Kathy misses it. She just keeps on, talking, and then, she finds the dog and stuff. And so finally we start walking away, and I said to Kathy, and she starts talking about her beach class again. I was like, Kathy, the dog's name is Violet. Come on. and she didn't get it. And I mean, she got it then, but that was it. And I said, no. I said, we have to find out. No, that just doesn't happen. We have to find out. We have to meet this lady again. We're going to meet this lady again. And because what I began to learn about signs and synchronicities is that for me, this is just for the universe according to Steve, for me, is that when you see a sign or a synchronicity and you spend your time saying, oh, wow, isn't that crazy? Oh, and so reached out to me. You're missing the message. Is that in my humble opinion, is that you really have to look into it, accept that you're going to see signs and synchronicities, and the excitement is warranted and beautiful, but really there's a message there. You have to read and understand the universe. Somebody has reached out to you to give you this message. What is the message? And so that was what was it. And so a few weeks later, people walk along the same beaches all the time. And little do we know, straight out of Central Casting, the dog comes behind the dunes again, jumps all over us. Mother comes running out. And so all of a sudden, Kathy starts telling her all about this. And, she has no filter between herself and the rest of the world.
Love it.
And lady understood every word of it. She was like, she was on board 100%.
Yeah.
And she said, and so I asked her, why did you name the dog Violet? This is a Dalmatian puppy with black spots. Like, how does a dog name Violet? And she said, well, her son and her would watch Gone with the Wind. And there was their favorite movie together, and they loved Scarlett O'Hara's violet dress. And she like wore, like Brett Butler gave it to her or something. And so when she named the dog, she named it Violet, but she spelt it the way Scarlett spells Violet's name. And she had lost her son about the same age as my son.
I forgot that part.
How does that happen?
I forgot that part.
Yeah, I mean, really, how does that happen? is that what? It was just about a Violet Dog or Violet Beach class or Saint Germain? Or was it about us two meeting at that critical time in the world where everything
Yeah.
had come undone and everything else? And she became a very good friend of ours, and we talked a lot, and we learned, and we shared with each other.
No,
And
that one
I
snuck up
definitely,
on me.
I definitely weeded that spiritual garden that day. But those are the beautiful signs and synchronicities that I experience every day, and I look for. I really do. And then I just want to share one more story with
Yeah, I got plenty of tissue, so I'm fine. Keep going.
and then another thing is that Kathy was always pushing me to tell the story, and this was way before us thinking about writing a book about it. And I was taking yoga at the time, Kundalini yoga. No, I love
Ah,
Kundalini yoga.
yay.
It's my favorite. I really do. And but it was just dumb luck. I found Kundalini yoga. My therapist, physical therapist, as part of my therapy, they said I should try yoga. And so I just looked in the phone book, the closest one by me just happened to be Kundalini.
Of
That's the way
course.
those things work, and very spiritual yoga. And and uh, um, and so there was this lady there who was she was 88 years old, and she did yoga, and she was amazing. Nancy, I just love this lady. And she had done yoga before yoga was cool back in the 60s. And even to this day, she like put her legs vertical and chat like nothing's going on, like all day long. It's like
I
it's
love it.
like and she wanted to go to a spiritual yoga festival that we're all going to, and she couldn't afford it because she's on public assistance and such. And so I told Kathy, I said, Kathy, maybe I could tell my story for the yoga
Yeah.
people, and we could charge we could ask for donations. And our future son-in-law, he plays the guitar, and I knew one of the ladies who sang there. And so I arranged like this workshop where I'd have them sing a song. I would tell part of the story that I shared today. And then they would sing another song. And they were all songs that everybody knew, so everyone could sing along because of the yoga practice and such. And so that's what we did. And we earned enough money to send it to this festival. It was wonderful. I could tell lots of stories about that, but I'll spare you. But 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 the reason why I'm saying this is that Sean, the gentleman playing the guitar, his hockey coach, he's a semi-pro hockey player. He won the Columbian University championship. He goes to Columbia University, and
Wow.
as a goalie, and he mentioned his hockey coach's name. He said Barbara Williams is his hockey coach, and I knew Barbara Williams.
Ah,
Her son had died as well. And Barbara Williams was someone from my hometown. And her son had died, and she was this remarkable lady because she taught people like Wayne Gretzky and Mark Messier how to skate, because that so much of hockey was about being tough and the strategy of the game, or be where the puck is going to be, and like all that
right.
stuff. But they really didn't know how to skate, and she taught them how to really skate.
Wow.
And so that's what she was telling Sean. And so I said, and I was aware of her son passing, and I thought it would be a great idea to invite her to my speaking thing. It might make her feel better.
Yeah.
And because she was really struggling with things, because she had sent me a message after her son had passed, and she asked me to call her, but it was very close to my son passing. I just wasn't ready to talk about things, and I never called her. And I sent her a few messages saying that I would, but I never heard back from her. And I said, invite her. And so he did. But about a day before, I got a phone call out of the blue, and I said, hello. And she says, hello, is this Steve? And I said, hello, is this Barbara Williams? And she said, yes. And she said, how'd you know it was me? And I said, I recognize your voice. She says, oh, really? I said, yeah, I remember all these times. I remember so many times we would sit together and we'd watch. I think it was hockey. I forgot what sport we would watch, but we would sit in the stands, and she would tell me all about her life. and
Oh,
I was just
wow.
like, and I was just like, I said, of course I remember you. And but I said to her, I said, Barbara, I don't remember what was hot the circumstances under which you and I would sit there and we'd watch the games. You tell me about your life. I mean, when did we ever sit together? And she said, we never sat together in a hockey game. And she said, my son was in the very next room to you when you were in the hospital. And then
Oh,
after I would visit my son, I knew you from the school board. And so I knew of you from the school board.
right.
And so I'd come to your room and I would hold your hand and I would say the Our Fathers to you and a Hail Mary, and then I would tell you all about my life and keep you company.
Stop. I love that story.
And that's something that's just like, and so go to people can hear you
Yeah.
whether you're there or not. Like Kathy, she wasn't there, but I heard her. Barbara
Yeah.
Williams was there. I heard her too.
Wow.
It's the energy, it's the love you put out into the world that regardless, it will find it. It will find its path to who's supposed to receive it, at least in my humble opinion. Universe according to Steve.
Right. I love that. I
And
love
those
the universe according to Steve. So, one question. Your message today is when you see a sign, you want to investigate it instead of just saying, oh, there's 111.
yeah.
That's my sign for XYZ. What do you do right then? Do you just ask for more information? What's your advice?
For me, and this is once again, this is Stevie's thing. This may not be anyone else's thing. It's
Okay.
like, for instance, a hummingbird's a spiritual animal. Okay.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people say, oh, when I see a hummingbird, there's a message in there. The first things I do if I see a hummingbird or perhaps a butterfly who like is acting like I feel a certain energy, I think to myself, what's going on at that time? Like could this be an exclamation point about something I was thinking about, or I just look for those types of things. I try to look. Some things are more overt, like that, like the dog, that's on a different level, or some things are more subtle. But that's usually the first step. Is just like trying to figure out what was going on at that time,
That's
and
smart.
I try to go through it that way. And sometimes, most of the times, it works. But at the very least, it keeps me thinking about the things that I do and the
Mhm.
understandings I receive from them. It is critical. The signs, just in the way, just the way that I was in spirit. There is spirit. There is. And so
Yeah.
if there is spirit, of course, spirit can communicate, and it communicates in different ways. I remember telling I remember a story I heard about. You ever see the movie Shining with Stephen King's movie, The Shining, with,
Oh,
uh,
yeah. I
with
get scared of
Where's
those.
Johnny? Well,
Yes, I
that,
remember that part.
that stuff. I remember hearing a story about Stanley Kubrick, the director, trying to get what's his name,
Nicholas,
yeah, Jack Nicholas
Jack
to star
Nicholas.
in the movie. And so Jack Nicholas had just done like a series of sad movies. He just did like a Pinball Wizard or something, like very complicated stuff. He said he wanted to do a happy story, and Stanley Kubrick said, "This is a happy story. You will love this. It'll make you feel so much better." And so Jack Nicholson gets the script and he reads it. And he calls up Stanley Kubrick. He says, "What are you out of your mind? What's happy about this?"
Yeah.
And he says, well, there's ghosts and spirits in there. He says, what's happier than that? He says, well, doesn't that prove there's an afterlife? So there's something after this. So that's something to look forward to.
The way it goes. Oh,
but
I
but
love
but
that.
but truly, because there is spirit, and spirit is going to communicate to you. And really, if you're a scientist, I'm a scientist, and I'm an engineer. I
Yeah.
am really.
Yeah.
I am, and I believe in science, and I
Yeah.
truly believe that Big Bang and Let There Be Light explains the same thing. We're all created from singularity, the creator, whatever you want. We're
Right.
all stardust. We're all spirit. And that's what these experiences has taught me, is that there is spirit everywhere. Some scientists will say, well, if you have the right conditions anywhere, you put a planet there, life will evolve there. And so that's proof that there isn't spirit. I say, no, that's exactly the opposite.
I know.
There is spirit. No matter what you do, it's going to come up. You give it the right circumstances.
That's right. That's right.
So, a question of perspective.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's a great. I love what you said about when you see something like that. It's an exclamation point on something
Yeah.
that's right around you. You know, that's what you were just saying. It's great.
Take a
Just
look.
wonderful. Yeah. Yeah.
I
Most
have,
likely.
I have one more short story.
I love it.
Okay.
Don't stop. I got plenty of these.
No, it's not one of those.
It's a happy one. I
Yeah,
love this.
well, not like Stanley Kubrick happy, but really happy.
Let it rip.
One things I struggled with for a long time was that, who am I to tell this? Who am I? I didn't study with this. Like yourself and other people, they study all this thing and they've walked this path. It's called to them. They've dedicated their life. And what did I do? I didn't do anything. All I did was survive. And I like, who am I to like be talking to these people? You know, I'll be speaking at a conference in Labor Day up in Washington D.C. It's the I think it's called the Association for Near Death Studies, an international
Oh,
organization,
yeah.
and I'll be speaking there. And I think to myself, who am I? These people are. Who am I to talk to them? And I remember one time, my mom lived in this place called the Villages in Florida, and so I would visit her once a year, you know, and I'd come down, and you know, it's a great fun place. Everyone drives around on golf carts. My mother's a social butterfly. She loves bridge. She has
Wow.
all her friends there. And so I would, they had a brewery there that was dollar beers. And so I would
Nice.
get my money's worth and then stuff. And I remember one time I visited her. It was so hot. It was so hot. And I had been drinking beer all weekend, and I just wanted to get home. It was a Sunday night. I had to be in work the next day. And I go to the airport. The planes are all grounded because of the weather. There's thunderstorms. And I'm thinking like, oh, we're not going to get out of here. I had to be back. And so finally they let us board the plane. And so I go to get on the plane. And back then we had assigned seats. And so I go to my assigned seats, and there is this Spanish lady there, and she's clutching a rosary, and she's shaking, and she's praying in Spanish. And I was like, it wasn't that I wasn't a compassionate person at the time. I just didn't want this. I wanted to put on my earbuds and go to sleep. I didn't want to deal with this lady.
Oh, yeah.
And then I didn't want her to do anything that would be. She looked like she was kind of having a meltdown, and I didn't want to, like, emergency services to have to be called and for the plane to be.
Oh.
And so I kind of like looked around, and I was like, there was no other seats. It was a packed flight. And, you know, anyone who got delayed earlier in the day were on that flight. There was not a seat to be had. And so I sat down next to her, and she started to really, you know, become upset. Then when they closed the luggage door to the airplane, she actually let out a yelp, and she started to weep. And I didn't know what else to do. I just reached over and I held her hand. And she looked at me, but she looked scared. It didn't seem to like bring her the relief that I thought it would bring her. And she looked scared. And I didn't know what to say to her. And I said, Jesus sent me. And I just said that because she had the cross, and she was doing this, and like, at least, I mean, I was a Christmas and Easter Catholic, but I really wasn't agnostic, or it just
Right.
you know, but it calmed her down tremendously. It really did. And so I was like, all right, no lightning came through.
You didn't burst into flames.
Flames or anything. I was okay. And then what happened was, as soon as the plane started to move, she started to cry again, and she really started to get upset. And I was holding this lady's hand. I owned this. there's no way of me. I had to deal with this.
Yeah.
I didn't know what else to say, and so I asked her if she had any grandchildren. Oh my God, the walls of Jericho came tumbling down. Boy, did she ever. She was going to New York to go to Maria and Georgie's wedding. Georgie's real name is Jorge, but she doesn't know why he uses Georgie. His old real name is fine. Maria makes more money than Georgie does, and she doesn't know why that's so, but times are different now. She explained how she came to this country basically in a raft in the late 70s, and she's made a life for herself, and she went on for 2.5 hours without coming up for air once. And this lady had been through so much. She was from Cuba, and from her childhoods and from coming here, not having anything, working in a restaurant, eventually marrying the owner of the restaurant,
Right on.
and uh, and she's made a life for herself. And as time went on, as I just felt so loved. I loved her. I really did. I felt such a deep love for this lady. And because she's been through so much and she wasn't soured by it, she still found
Right.
such beauty in life. And so when it was
Mhm.
time to get off the airplane, um, of course, she was like 5 foot nothing. She couldn't reach the ocean eggs and stuff. I got them down for her. I carried them off the plane and we were gabbing. And then at the end of the run, at the end of the security area, her family was there. It was like, I saw Maria and Georgie and everyone she talked about. They were yelling, "Grandma, Grandma," and all this other stuff. And I said to her, I have to say goodbye now. And she says, "No, no, come and meet the family." I said, "No, no, I gotta say goodbye now." And I paused for a second and I said, "I have something I have to tell you." And she says, "What's wrong?" And
Oh,
I said, "I lied." She said, "Oh?" And I said, "The Jesus thing." I said, "Jesus didn't send me. I just wanted you to shut up." I really said that. And the lady let out a big old laugh and she put her package bags down and she pulled me by my ears and just brought me down and kissed my forehead. And she said, "The only one you deceived was yourself." And I said, "No." I said, "I'm not even religious." And she
Mhm.
said, "Sometimes the Lord chooses the most
Yeah.
unlikely of servants. And once again, the Lord's chosen wisely." And
Yeah.
I didn't believe her then, and I don't believe her now, but
Oh,
it really does show that well, what I believe is one of the true morals of the story for me is that your Om Namo Gurudev Namo. Everyone has an inner wisdom inside them and an inner
right.
teacher. You learn and you share your knowledge, just as I learned there and I shared my
Mhm.
knowledge there.
Mhm.
Is that
Yeah.
modesty is important in life, but that prevents you from sharing what you have to offer, it's something
Mm.
else besides modesty. You really have to be able to feel comfortable that you have something to share with people, and
Yeah.
uh, and that's what that taught me.
You know, I've followed another experiencer, John Davis, who said something because he had a different experience, but it's still the love, right? And the light. And he said something that I've kind of tried on to see if I like it. And I wasn't going to say anything before I knew how I felt about it. He said, the hardest part of being on the planet is that we are shielded from God's love. Once it passed, you start feeling the love and all of that. And and then what we do here is try to find God's love because there's a correspondence. Emmanuel Swedenborg, the correspondence
Oh
between
yeah, yeah,
heaven
yeah.
and earth.
I know that fellow. Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
I know the group. Yeah.
yeah, and so that's what we get, and we read that, and then we have our faith, whatever faith that might be, and then we have our experiences, and then we have you. We have people who have had experiences that are here, and thank God for computers and YouTube so we can hear everybody's story so our faith grows. You know, it's I don't I would love to experience what you had when it's my time. Right. But it builds my faith to hear someone who's like, that was not on the radar. None of this was on your radar or on your vision board.
Exactly. I write a newsletter, and my newsletter, I did a whole thing on vision boards this week. So it's great that you should you should mention that. Well,
Oh my gosh. I appreciate you so much. This has been wonderful. And I want to thank you for spending all the time and all the wisdom and letting me interrupt, because I watch YouTube videos and I'm new at this, and the host is not supposed to do what I just did, but I liked it. I really enjoyed it.
You were such a beautiful spirit, and I enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you so much.
And I enjoy the questions from your people, because that's so important, because a lot of times, a lot of things I've come to terms with has been the result of people asking questions, and some questions that I wasn't able to answer, like in the full sense, and it triggers new thoughts in my mind, and it is very important. It really is.
Absolutely.
Could I mention my book a little bit?
Please, it's time. Just a minute now.
This is my book. It's called The Place Between Here and There, and it's available on Amazon. The Place Between Here and There. It's in an audio book. It's in Spanish, and it's been, surprisingly, we've sold tens of thousands of copies of it. I was very surprised. I thought, just my mom would buy it.
It's a wonderful listen.
But truly is that it's about this experience. The part about the drug dealer and the accident and stuff, that's not in the book, because those are all things I came to terms after writing the book, and I intend on writing a second book in the not too distant future. But it's a beautiful story. It's not just a story about my experience, but it's also a story about my co-author, Kathy. She was a driving force in helping me to come to terms in the same way that I was mentoring the children in that other place. I think she was mentoring me in a way, because
that does mirror. Yeah, definitely.
And that's really a love story too. And there are parts in the book that are going to make you cry, make most people cry, but it has a happy ending. And still writing chapters of life as time goes on. But if there's one thing that I would like everyone to experience, and there's one walk away from the book, be sure to read it. If you do read it, read the questions and answers in the back, because when we wrote the book, we wanted to have a certain narrative flow to it. So in the questions and answers, we explained some of the important underlying things in the book, in the narrative. But what I'd like people to know is that life is good and people are good, even when very sad things happen. And it's really true. And these are just words. These are just Stephen's words. But if you could find out for yourself why this is true in your own way, in your own Om Namo Gurudev Namo, I am certain you will find peace in this world or any other world that comes after this. And I mean it. It's just that life is good and people are good, even when sad things happen.
Oh, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this afternoon, Stephen, and definitely buy the book. I did see you on YouTube, and then bought the book, and I got a lot. And there's so much to this, and I'm so happy that you came on and was my first interview.
Oh, that's
so nice.
That's going to be the best of one of many, because you have a beautiful, beautiful mission. You have a beautiful energy that I sense right away. You have so much to receive and give to the world, and I honor you.
Oh, I honor you too, and our audience. Thank you so much, everyone, for stopping by. And this will be posted shortly. Thank you. Have a wonderful time.